Hello and welcome along to Transfer Talk. Raheem Sterling's Chelsea future looks in doubt. Will he stay at Stamford Bridge or could he seek a move away? It's a big story. We've got the latest on it, so we've wheeled out the big guns. Kevin Hatchard, of course, is your European football expert. We've also got Flex, we've got James Fudra, and we've got Dave Reed as well. Now, Ivan Toney's future is unclear too, with an offer from Saudi Arabia on the table. Will he leave West London? Arsenal are trying to get a deal over the line for Mikel Merino. We'll have a fresh update on that move. And will it take 3 bids for Fulham to get Scott McTominay? Right, lots to come. Good afternoon to you. And, of course, to our chief reporter, Carvey Solokal. Good to see you, mate. We're going to get into Chelsea, first of all, because there's a lot to unpack, isn't there? Starting with Raheem Sterling. Does he have a future at Chelsea? Good question.
If I had to put money on it, I would say that I think Chelsea would listen to offers for him. Enzo Maresca spoke to the player on Friday, explained to him that for technical reasons, he wasn't going to be in the matchday squad for the game against Manchester City yesterday. I think if a player of Raheem Sterling's experience and standing is not in the matchday 20, that tells you that a message is being sent to him that perhaps you need to start looking elsewhere because your future may not be at this club. Now, looking at it from Raheem Sterling's point of view, of course, he's still got 3 years left on his Chelsea contract. So he is well within his rights to say, I'm not going anywhere. I want to stay here. I want to fight for my place in the squad and the team. But I think it's a big decision for him to make. And I think speaking to Enzo Maresca last night after the game, Enzo Maresca was asked about this sort of statement from Raheem Sterling's camp about him needing some clarification about what was going on. And Enzo Maresca basically said, look, if he needs clarification, we might have that conversation in the next few days.
A bit of sympathy from a lot of fans, a lot of Chelsea fans with the situation, you know, senior player. But then this statement gets released just before kickoff, really. So how has that statement gone down with the club itself?
I don't think it's gone down very well with Chelsea. You know, the thing you do in football, if you're a player, if you're dropped, you stay quiet, you fight for your place, you don't say anything in public. But we don't know what happened at this meeting between Raheem Sterling and Enzo Maresca on Friday. If Raheem Sterling was told, we want you to leave, you don't have a future at this club, then you could understand why he would want to get on the front foot and make his point, want to get, as soon as the team news drops today, 75 minutes before kickoff, for him to be in a position to let the world know that he's got 3 years left on his contract. He gives everything for the club. He feels he has a deep connection with the Chelsea fans as well, and he doesn't want to leave. But it's just one of these things that is going to run and run now, I think, until a deadline day, because I get the feeling that Chelsea would prefer it if he was to go, although they've never said that in public. Remember, he's on big wages compared to a lot of the new players they're bringing in. But then he's got 3 years left on his contract. So if he doesn't want to go, he can stay at Stamford Bridge.
Yeah. All right, we're going to talk more in a moment just on potentially where he could go and what will happen. A few players have come and gone already with Chelsea. One big potential incoming, though, is Victor Osimhen. That's a name that's been bandied around. That's a name that's going to excite the fans. I mean, how close is that?
Well, I think it's a deal that could happen. But if it's going to happen, it will happen closer to deadline day. I think Chelsea are playing a little bit of Napoli gave him a new contract, massive wages that they just cannot afford. He's not training with the first team squad. He wasn't involved in their game yesterday, which was a terrible performance under the new head coach Antonio Conte. So look, he is leaving Napoli. Napoli can't afford to keep him, and Chelsea know that. Chelsea don't want to pay over the odds for him. Chelsea are not going to be paying any players £300,000 a week anymore. They've made that very clear. So I think if there's a possibility of doing a deal for him, they will try and do a deal later on this window. And speaking to Chelsea fans yesterday at Stamford Bridge, he is the player they want. they're desperate to have a striker, somebody like Haaland. OK, you're not going to get somebody as good as Haaland, but somebody in that kind of mould who's got a physical presence, who can lead the line. Chelsea are desperate for a player like that. They've had players like that in the past. They need one again. And I think Osimhen, for a lot of Chelsea fans, ticks a lot of boxes.
They might be desperate for Osimhen, but they need to get some players out the door as well. So, I mean, what's going on with the Conor Gallagher move at the moment? Is it looking likely?
Well, I think it could depend on what happens with João Felix coming the opposite direction from Atletico Madrid. Obviously, Atletico Madrid have spent big money on Julian Alvarez as well. But Conor Gallagher, I know the fans love him. He was the Chelsea captain for a lot of the games last season. When they conceded, when Haaland scored yesterday, you could hear Chelsea fans singing Conor Gallagher's name. So the Chelsea fans are not happy about him going, but I think he's on his way. It just depends on Atletico Madrid being able to get the finances in place to do the deal. And looking at the Chelsea programme yesterday, Conor Gallagher's name was not even on the back of the programme. There was the names of something like 30, 40 Chelsea players. No Conor Gallagher, no Broja, no Chalobah in there either. So no Lukaku. Ben Chilwell's name was there, but I don't think he's got much of a future. I think Chelsea would like him to move on as well, but he's got a contract as well, so he doesn't have to leave if he doesn't want to.
Yeah, OK. Let's move away from Chelsea. We could probably do a whole show on Chelsea again, but we're not going to. Big story or big association with Ivan Toney at Brentford. He was not in the squad at all in that first game. He's been linked with a move to Al Ahly in Saudi Arabia. How strong is that possibility?
Well, the interest is very, very strong. Al Ahly at the moment are in talks with Brentford and also Ivan Toney's representatives. Now, I was in Saudi Arabia at Christmas. We went and visited Al Ahly. They're one of the biggest clubs in Saudi Arabia. They're owned by the Public Investment Fund. They've got players like Riyad Mahrez, players like Firmino. They're one of the biggest clubs in Jeddah as well, along with Al Ittihad. They want a striker. And at the moment, the striker they want is Ivan Toney. Now, everybody knows Saudi Arabia, OK, the level of football may not be up to the standards that you would get in the big leagues in Europe, but the level of finances on offer are incredible. So I think it's going to be a difficult deal for Ivan Toney to turn down. The finances are going to be really, really mouth-watering, but he has to weigh up what kind of impact that would have on his future, because he's somebody, of course, who's got ambitions to carry on playing for England. Would moving to Al Ahly affect his chances of doing that? Having said that, though, players like Laporte, who plays in Saudi Arabia, he won the Euros with Spain. He was in their starting 11. So I think the level of football in Saudi Arabia is improving. And the finances, I think, could be crucial. But definitely, Al Ahly really, really want him.
OK. Always very enlightening. Thank you, mate. Thanks for popping in. All right, I know you're very busy. Enjoy the rest of your day. OK, let's get into this with the guys then. James, I want to start with you, actually. Let's start with Raheem Sterling. Is his position now untenable? And if so, where do you think he might end up?
What's really interesting is Enzo Maresca suggested in pre-season, on their pre-season tour of America, that he was one of Chelsea's most important players, and he featured in pre-season. He started against Real Madrid, played in all their pre-season matches. He even did some media in the build-up to the game for the club, suggesting it probably has taken people by surprise at Chelsea, the fact he's not in that 20-man squad for their first game of the season. But with Palmer and Nkunku, Neto, Mudryk and Madueke in the squad, somebody's going to have to miss out. You can't fit all those wide players in a 20-man squad. So somebody was always going to miss out, and somebody, based on that list of players I just mentioned, needs to leave, you'd think. What is fascinating is that Sterling was actually the first marquee signing that the Clear Lake Group brought 2 years ago, the first signing under this new ownership model. If he leaves, then 3 players they signed in that first window, 3 senior players, will have departed the football club, with Koulibaly and Aubameyang as well. And that is a suggestion that they have got things wrong when it comes to recruitment. They're looking to get that right now, but they're still feeling the consequences of what they did in the first couple of windows.
And which Premier League clubs could potentially be interested in him?
It's difficult to say, because there'll be the wage demands that come with it. There'll be the fact that clubs are just so well run now, and they don't want to blow their own wage structures to bring players in unless they're elite. And Raheem Sterling over the course of the last 2 seasons hasn't been elite. He hasn't hit the numbers that we've seen for Manchester City when he won the PFA Player of the Year award, when he won all those different titles as well, FA Cups, League Cups. And so I've struggled to see a Premier League club that he fits within. His defence would be, he's had 2 years at Chelsea, he's played under 5 different head coaches if you include Enzo Maresca. So it's been very difficult for him to hit the highs that he hit for Manchester City. He's still 29 years of age, he's still got a lot of football ahead of him, but his list of options are very different from the list of options that maybe he would have had 2 years ago when he was hitting those heights for Manchester City.
All right, so James saying that his wages are going to be a big barrier to moving within the Premier League. How about within some of the bigger clubs in Europe?
It's just as much of a problem, because you look at, say, Spain. He's been linked with Real Madrid in the past. They absolutely don't need him right now. You look at Barcelona, they couldn't afford him even if they wanted him, and they don't need him to come in either. Atleti are concentrating in other areas, so that's Spain dealt with. Nobody else can come close to affording him. You look at Germany, none of the top clubs, I think, would need to make that move or want to pursue that, and again, would completely smash their wage structures if they were to do that, I think. Bayern maybe could make it work, but they don't need him. PSG are actively pursuing Jadon Sancho, it seems, or talking to United about, how that lines up with Ugarte. So they're looking at other options as well. So then that takes you to Italy, and the only club really that you can think of that maybe could make it happen is Juventus. They're the ones who've been most consistently linked with him in the Italian media. There was talk a few days ago of could they include Chiesa in that. They seem quite clearly to be trying to edge Chiesa out of the door, which I think is a shame. But unless that happens, I just don't see how Juventus can make the numbers work. So he might be in a bit of a gilded cage, really.
OK, well, he's got a bit of time, hasn't he, to maybe get some interest from somewhere, sort something out. How about Ben Chilwell? As mentioned there, he actually was included, wasn't he, in the squad list on the back of the programme, but we're hearing that he has been told he is surplus to requirements, he's up for sale, essentially. Why would he be on that list of players that are surplus to requirements?
I think there's a variety of reasons. Firstly, you have to look at stylistically. Does he fit what Enzo Maresca is trying to do with this new-look Chelsea side? Possession-based, he wants his fullback to be able to tuck in, he wants his fullback to be able to be good in 1v1 duels. And when you look at what Ben Chilwell's strengths have been over the years, they've very much been as a progressive wing-back, on the overlap, on the gallop, getting crosses in the box, back to his time at Leicester. And, the odd fantastic shot from outside the box, etc., etc. And that was what Chelsea needed at that time. But Enzo Maresca going to look a left full-back with those capabilities. You look at Marc Cucurella, of how different they are. Marc Cucurella relishes 1v1 duels. He wants to be aggressive. He wants to get at people's heels and do that sort of side of the job. And also he's going to be comfortable in possession and want the ball at his feet as well. So a completely different style profile. But then we also get to his availability or lack of. In the last 3 seasons, Ben Chilwell's missed 100 games of football. It's absolutely staggering. As we can see some of the situations there with his minutes. And there has been 2021 season, 27 games. You're thinking that's not too bad, 2,290 minutes. But then the season after that, 21-22, down to just 7 games played. Then again, he manages to find some fitness and form in the 22-23 season, plays 23 games. Again, nowhere near all of the Premier League games, but a substantial amount more than the 7 this season before. And then it gets to last season, 23-24. Big injury, only 13 games played. And that's been a common theme for Ben Chilwell, which I'm sure for himself has been super frustrating. It has for a lot of Chelsea fans. They've experienced that at the opposite side of fullback with Reece James as well. So availability and style both not weighing in Ben Chilwell's favour at the moment under Enzo Maresca.
OK, so in general consensus on Sterling is, he hasn't got loads of options, but how about Chilwell? This is a guy who was bought by Chelsea for big money. He was bought for almost £50 million not that long ago.
You feel like he's in a similar situation, really, to Raheem Sterling. He only signed a contract extension, I think, last year, and he's got another 3 years to go on that contract. So, again, Premier League clubs will have to assess the football that he's played, the amount of wages they're able to offer. If there's a loan deal potentially on the table for him, could Chelsea supplement that wage structure to enable him to get that move and to go out and get minutes? But from his point of view, there's no international tournament for him to be fighting for next year. And there's so much going on at Chelsea. I think some players might be sitting there thinking, well, maybe I'll be here longer than the manager. Maybe I'll go away on loan for a year and come back and I can still be a Chelsea player. I know Chelsea are fully behind the manager. I know they're fully backing him. They're bought into this style of play. There's nothing to suggest that that's going to change anytime soon. But I think given the track record of what's gone on at Chelsea, it can't be something that you can say absolutely not going to happen to.
OK, so Sterling and Chilwell could both be a way out of Chelsea. I wonder if someone else could be leaving West London. Could be Ivan Toney, couldn't it? Could he be leaving Brentford? We will be live to the training ground for the latest next. Welcome back to Transfer Talk. Let's get to another big potential move, and that is Ivan Toney. Could there be big developments on his future over the coming days? Let's get the very latest right now, get to the club's training ground and join Paul Gilmore, who's been there all morning for us. Hi, Paul. What's the latest? Bring us up to speed.
Well, Matt, are we nearing the end game of the Ivan Toney saga? Of course, he has 1 year left on his contract, was left out of the squad to face Crystal Palace yesterday for transfer-related reasons. It has emerged that he was the subject of a failed bid from Saudi Arabia side Al Ahly. And the reason that failed is because it didn't get close to Brentford's valuation. That said, there's been a lot of interest in Ivan Toney from various clubs across the world. The Al Ahly interest of late has been the most realistic, and that just always a sign that when a player is left out of a squad for that reason, it is getting closer. The word is that what we're hearing, it's not imminent, maybe nothing in the next couple of days, but certainly time is ticking if Brentford want to make some money in this window, because as I mentioned, he has a year left on his current deal. It's a case of who blinks first in this kind of transfer negotiation. We saw this with Harry Kane and Bayern Munich, and Tottenham, 1 year left on his contract. Bayern Munich ended up paying over £100 million for a striker like that. Will it be the same for Ivan Toney in terms of maybe not quite as high as that valuation? We know that Thomas Frank did say he was worth 100 million as recently as November. The reality is that Brentford may accept something closer to 60 million or around that mark. But will any interested club be willing to go that far? So it's a case of who blinks first. There's two ways of looking at it. The one is Ivan Toney is 28 years of age. He may be able to guarantee you as a club maybe 20 goals minimum per season. He had an impressive Euros where he made an impact with England on the route to the final. The other side of that is his age can also work against him in a market that is actively promoting the purchase of young players with a sell-on value. He won't have that, but what he will do is guarantee the goals straight away. So does that put certain clubs off in a market of profit and sustainability rules where it would ultimately kind of be a gamble or certainly a short-term move, and those are the two ways of looking at it. So it's an interesting saga, isn't it? It's gone on for some time. A lot of talk since it emerged that Ivan Toney wanted a new challenge away from Brentford. They've been doing okay without him. They had a good record without him during his ban, and of course at the weekend they won 2-1, and they have planned for this eventuality. It hasn't crept up on them. So I think we're going to hear a lot of Ivan Toney over the next week or so as it ramps up towards that deadline at the end of the month.
OK, cheers, Paul. Thank you very much. Always happy to see Gilmore. No? Right, let's move on from that quick. Dave, can Brentford cope with what they've got without Ivan Toney if he goes?
Well, I think they've proven that they probably already have. And what you can guarantee with Brentford is that they know exactly what they're doing in the transfer window, and they have got every eventuality planned out. But let's not rewrite history. Ivan Toney has scored plenty of goals. But I'm going to show you why Brentford might just be fine without him. First, though, we have to go back. He really has been a focal point of the Brentford attack. Toney scored 34.5% of Brentford's goals in 22-23, behind some big names, only Harry Kane and Erling Haaland. The only problem is this wasn't last season. That's the season before last, and Brentford have had to cope without him because of his ban. So let's take a look at how they've got on over the last year with and without Ivan Toney. Remember, he returned in January for the final 17 games of the season. Brentford won more games, scored more goals per game. They also conceded fewer goals per game, and they had a much higher win percentage and also collected, on average, more points per game as well. So it seems like they've done pretty well. Thomas Frank had to shuffle things around without Toney and finished the season 13 points clear of the bottom three. Staying up was a successful season for Brentford last year. Can they do the same again this time around? It's understood Al Ahly are the team that want to sign him, and they've already made significant signings in the last couple of years as well. Edouard Mendy, Roberto Firmino, Riyad Mahrez and Franck Kessié as well could all be new teammates for the striker. We know that Ivan Toney has been a man in demand, and he gave a round of interviews in January saying he wanted to win titles and wanted to be competing at the very top of the table. So where does this leave him now?
Well, exactly. So, I mean, look, he could join some good players in Saudi Arabia, no doubt. But surely there's a Premier League club out there that would want to sign Ivan Toney. He's
Well, if we turn the clocks back to sort of a year ago, that conversation was very much at the forefront. Arsenal really linked to him. That didn't materialise, of course, and you're looking at other Premier League teams, but it leaves them in limbo because we did hear there from Paul Gilmore in terms of the valuation hasn't been met and he's got a year left on his contract, so we're not privy to know exactly what that bid was and why it was turned down. But maybe that's what's putting off a lot of Premier League clubs as it stands. I mean, if you're looking at the window drawing to a close, you're maybe predicting Premier League clubs could come in a few days before the end of the window and test Brentford's resolve. They know that he's only got a year left and Brentford need to sell Ivan Toney. But if we just go through some of the traditional top six sides, as you say, I mean, let's start at Arsenal. Second top scorers in the league last year, conceded the fewest goals.
a lot of people say they need a striker.
Absolutely. Some people, depending on your opinion on Arsenal, some people say they'll be absolutely fine without one. They need to tweak in other areas. Other Arsenal fans will say absolutely, but maybe Toney's not the answer. But for me, definitely would help Arsenal be a stronger outfit, a good alternative to Kai Havertz through the middle, or Jesus, completely different to both of those two players. But Mikel Arteta seems to have almost certainly gone in a different direction. If you're looking at Spurs, they've just had a huge outlay on Dominic Solanke. There was £1 there, so that shows you what Ange's preference is and how he wants to play. At Liverpool, I don't think there's much point even discussing that with Jota and Darwin Núñez not even getting a look in at the minute. Manchester United have opted for younger profiles. They're going in a completely different direction and also the price point as well. Newcastle, fairly settled with Alexander Isak. Yes, in terms of Callum Wilson, there's injury concerns there, but Ivan Toney's going to want to go to another. Going to be the main man, and the clubs that we've just discussed there, it's not going to happen. So it leaves Ivan with very few options, and whilst we don't know what the valuation is that needs to be met, also limits his options too.
Yeah, but then if you're Ivan Toney and you go to Saudi Arabia, is it not a little bit early in your career? Are you not then potentially cutting short your career at the top level of club football?
It'd be a really big decision for him to make. I think it's important to state that there are clubs interested in signing Ivan Toney, but they'd be more interested in signing him for free next summer. Dave spoke about some of the quotes in many interviews he's given, speaking about his ambition to challenge for titles. But with Brentford wanting such a significant fee this summer, with Ivan Toney's wage demands and with Ivan Toney wanting to fight for titles, it leaves you with very few options that can match his ambitions and match what Brentford want in this transfer window. So with that in mind, the Saudi Pro League becomes potentially the only avenue in this transfer window. His argument may be, I can spend another year at Brentford, I can't be sold against my will, play another year at Brentford, score plenty more goals, keep Brentford in the top flight, and then leave for free next summer. Clearly Brentford may not want that to be the case because a player they bought for £5.5 million, they want to make some profit on him if he's not going to sign a new contract at the club. Fascinating situation he's in. Maybe he may think this may be the best option and then next summer assess his options again. Of course, there is the tax implications if he's to come back from Saudi Arabia early if he goes there. But at this point in his career, that could be the only option in this window because, as Flex has really well pointed out, in terms of top six clubs, there doesn't feel like there's any avenue in this window. It seems unlikely unless Arsenal could get a really cut price fee at the end of the transfer window, whether they'd be interested or not.
Well, give his agent some hope. Come on, how about around Europe?
I think around Europe's difficult because I think you look at, say, Germany, they wouldn't be able to put that kind of money on the table. Harry Kane, I've heard, is pretty good, so I think Bayern are all right for a centre-forward. Spain as well. But I think what's interesting is just the point that James made, actually, about Brentford want to make a big profit on him. Well, they can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, we want to make a profit, but you set it at a level where clubs aren't going to come in. Yeah. And then you can't moan a year later when he leaves on a free because you priced him out of a move. So you've got to be really... That's not me having a dig at Brentford, but I just think in general, clubs do have to be quite careful with that because players are very, very aware of the power they have now once you get towards that final year of your contract. And so you know, around Europe, just to go back to your question, clubs are being very risk averse. They're not spending enormous amounts of money unless, you know, Bayern can do that, for example. Not many others can. And you look, there's a handful of clubs around Europe. PSG, Gonzalo Ramos has just been injured. They seem to be looking at other options. And we'll talk about those later. But I think clubs are being very careful.
OK. All right. Well, stay tuned, because it's going to be very interesting to see what happens to Ivan Toney over the next few days. And stay tuned as well, because coming up, Kevin has picked 5 European players to watch in the transfer market. Always very interesting. Find out who next. Goretzka of Bayern Munich could be on his way.
Yeah, I think the Goretzka thing's really interesting. What shifted here is that Rudi Völler, who has the ear of the Germany coach, Julian Nagelsmann, is a big part of that setup at the DFB. He has said recently that if Goretzka has real interest in being part of that Germany squad for the World Cup, he's going to have to move. You look at the players that Bayern have in that central midfield area. They've brought in João Palhinha, And they've already got Alex Pavlovic. They want to develop him. He's a homegrown player. Joshua Kimmich looks as though he's going to be a big part of what they do in midfield. Now, yes, Goretzka's wages are big. Yes, he's not the youngest player, but I still believe he can do a job at a high level. So I think Premier League clubs would do well to keep an eye on this. He's saying publicly he wants to stay. We'll see.
Yeah, we might just expand on where he could go a bit later on in the show. How about this chap, Maxence Lacroix, centre-back from Wolfsburg?
So I said back in April, I thought as soon as Oliver Glasner went to Palace, the light bulb went off and I thought, well, that's the kind of player I think could do really well in the Premier League and that Glasner has got the best out of, because when he first came through, really interesting player actually at Wolfsburg, then dipped a little, but then when Glasner took over at Wolfsburg, he linked him up with the American defender John Brooks. He was one of the best players in the league, and they got into that top four and qualified for the Champions League. Only a year left on his deal, cheaper option, quick, good in the air. I think it'd be a great signing.
All right, keep an eye on him. How about Ademola Lookman of Atalanta? Hat-trick in the Europa League final. Of course, there must be a few suitors for him.
So what shifted here, being really strong with the move to PSG, and apparently asked to be left out of the squad for the game against Lecce. Atalanta want to keep him. PSG are looking at options, as I said earlier about Jadon Sancho, so they're looking for that attacking player. Gonzalo Ramos, as I mentioned, injured, so they need somebody to come in and just beef up those forward options. With Victor Osimhen quite expensive, they're just looking elsewhere.
Yeah. OK, let's get back to a centre-back then. Jonathan Tah of Leverkusen. He was associated with Bayern, moved to Bayern, wasn't he?
So Bayern very, very keen on him at one stage in the window. But Leverkusen holding firm. They don't want him to go. He was such a key part of what they did last season as they won the double in Germany. He was only a sub in the Super Cup at the weekend, but he came on, played a big role. They won it. And so it looks as though it's leaning towards him staying, but he's only got 1 year left on his deal.
OK, and finally, maybe a name you might not know that well, Florian Neuhaus, midfielder from Borussia Mönchengladbach. So could he be coming to the Premier League?
It could be. There was a stage where he was being linked with £40 million moves to Bayern, to Dortmund, maybe Premier League clubs. And it's just all tailed off for him in the last couple of years. His club, Borussia Mönchengladbach, have had a bit of a nosedive in general. He's not even getting in that team right now, and he wasn't anywhere near getting in the team at the weekend in the German Cup. So I think he could be, if Premier League clubs are looking to snap up a fixer-upper, he's a great technical midfielder in the right setup.
I like that. Fixer-upper. I've never heard that of a player. He's a fixer-upper.
I think I've been described like that.
Right, OK, yeah. First, there'll be plenty more on those stories as well. You've just got to head to the website by scanning that QR code there. And we'll have that and a lot more as well. Just all the big stories that are happening in the transfer world at the moment. Right, Kevin, I want to stick with you actually for a moment because West Ham are in talks with Paris Saint-Germain over the signing of midfielder Carlos Soler. So West Ham potentially putting their hands in their pocket again. They've got quite a lot of central midfielders. So would he be a creative upgrade in that area, do you think?
I think he's certainly somebody I could see Julian Lopetegui liking very much. He's a really neat and tidy midfielder, technically very good. He can be versatile as well. He can play a bit deeper in midfield. I don't think that's where you get the best out of him necessarily. I think when the reins are off and he can really go for it and really drive forward, that's when he comes alive. But he can play a bit wider as well. So I can see why Lopetegui would be interested.
OK, so we'll see whether West Ham actually do make a move there. They have spent already quite a lot of money, haven't they? Let's stick with a midfielder from Europe. And Real Sociedad midfielder Mikel Merino was left out of the squad over the weekend in their La Liga game against Rayo Vallecano as Arsenal negotiate with Sociedad. Dave, they've never fully replaced Granit Xhaka, have they, really, in that sort of left-sided midfield role? Is that how you think Mikel Arteta sees Merino as the natural successor in that position?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Granit Xhaka left, and I think perhaps the idea that Mikel Arteta had was that Kai Havertz would fill that position in the left eight, and then it seems that he's moved into the forward line, and now that's kind of his home now. And then Declan Rice has actually moved into that left eight position, and he's moved from that deeper lying six to the left side of the midfield, and he preferred, certainly last season, Jorginho, and then Thomas Partey started at the weekend. So Mikel Merino would come in and fill that role in the left-hand side of midfield, and you know, he's got everything really. He's combative, he can get forward, he can carry the ball. I mean, Kevin, you'll have seen much more of him than I have, but he almost seems like, you know, a carbon copy of Granit Xhaka in terms of the creativity side, but can also win balls in the air, and he's combative as well.
Yeah, I think he maybe hasn't got necessarily the passing range of Xhaka necessarily. We've seen what an amazing job he's done at Bayer Leverkusen. But he brings so much to the table in terms of mentality as well. This is a guy that helped Real Sociedad win the Copa del Rey against Athletic Club, their big rivals. He did it with a broken rib. So, you know, this is a guy who I think has learned a lot from playing in the Premier League, playing in England briefly with Newcastle. So he learned a lot from playing briefly under Thomas Tuchel at Dortmund. All of these different experiences really kind of taught him a lot. And at Real Sociedad, he's come into his own as a real leader in that team. So you're getting a gifted player, but also you're getting a real voice in the dressing room as well.
I think I'm right in saying he won the most duels in La Liga last season, or something like that. He's up there near the top at least. Why, James, do you think Arteta is seemingly more keen to shore up the defence and the midfield than add to his attacking options?
Well, this is what Arsenal have done under Mikel Arteta and Edu. 18 of their 24 signings into the first-team players have been either goalkeepers, defenders or defensive midfielders. They've actually spent 3 times the amount on those type of players than the 6 attacking players they've brought. And one thing Mikel Arteta has acknowledged is that title-winning teams are built on having a strong defence. Last season they had the best defence in the Premier League, way more clean sheets than anybody else. So it's about creating that platform and signing players that can not only prevent goals going in, but build that platform from the back. And we saw that with the sign of Calafiori, somebody brought in to help the side defensively, but also to build that platform so that the front three can cause havoc. So it does make sense because, and one thing I love about Arsenal and their transfer strategy over the course of the last few years is, ideally, I think they're looking to sign players like Calafiori and Ben White, players who are young but also vastly experienced. But also, when they see opportunities like Mikel Merino into his final year of his contract, know they can get a good fee for him, as they did with Jorginho as well at Chelsea, they're ready to act on it. I think that's really smart. It's not sticking to your guns and just having one way of doing things, but when you see things, being able to be flexible in the market and change things to alter your approach and to ultimately, the main thing, get that squad in a better shape than it was last season.
And speaking of being opportunistic, Arsenal, let's not forget, Arsenal wanted Benjamin Šeško at the start of this transfer window. And I think the view at the time was it was kind of Šeško or bust for Arsenal for a front man this summer. Now, whether that opinion will change within Arsenal, probably not between now and the end of the window, unless something, again, amazing becomes available. So they have showed over the years that they are ready to act if something becomes available.
So if they do get Merino, does there need to be a midfield outgoing? Because you're going to have Rice, Ødegaard, Jorginho, Partey, Merino, and Havertz can play in midfield as well. You've potentially got 6 midfield options.
Well, not necessarily. The obvious one that I would be looking at would probably be Fabio Vieira, who hasn't managed to nail down a starting spot. I think the issue with Thomas Partey that we see, he's fantastic on his day when he's playing and he's fit and he's firing, but there's a probability there, quite a high probability, that there's going to be some injuries along the way. Declan Rice is robust as anything and can play as a deeper line midfield or, like we're saying, more advanced. Jorginho, they've given him an extension and I think he's going to be happy with his role in terms of when he's needed, when he needs to come in and use his experience. Ødegaard is a staple, and I feel like with Kai Havertz, if they don't go and get another out-and-out forward, out-and-out number 9, he's going to occupy that in relation to Gabi Jesus as well. So the outgoing might not actually necessarily have to be in midfield, and then he's already departed that space and left the side, and it's more further forward. In Nketiah, it's going to be surplus. So I don't think it necessarily has to be a Thomas Partey who must leave or a Jorginho who must leave. I think Mikel Arteta will absolutely want to keep that department of his team completely intact because he knows what it takes to go up against this Pep Guardiola side. Arsenal fans know exactly what it is. They got to the last day of the season. They need as much resources as they can. Look how stacked they are at the back. They've still got Zinchenko. Just because Calafiori arrived, it didn't mean that he needed to leave. He's still starting games. Timber's like a new signing. So, no, I don't think it necessarily needs to be a key one leaving, but maybe Fabio Vieira, yes.
I think Havertz is a full-time centre-forward now. I think if you look what happened with Germany in the summer, that's always been the big thing with him. Where does he actually play? Where does he fit best? I think those days of him bouncing around as a utility player finished. I think he needs to focus on being a centre-forward and bringing that kind of almost unique skill set that he has to that position.
OK, we've got some breaking news now concerning the Championship and concerning Preston North End, who've already gone through 2 managers this season, believe it or not. And we've heard that Paul Heckingbottom, former Sheffield United manager, is in advanced talks to become the new manager of Preston North End. It comes after Ryan Lowe left the club after the first game of the season, and Mike Marsh also stepped down from the interim role. Heckingbottom has been out of work since December after he was sacked by Sheffield United. Preston next play against Luton Town. Not an easy game at Deepdale on Saturday. They've lost their first 2 games of the league as well. So they're in talks with Paul Heckingbottom, with him potentially becoming the 3rd manager of the season for Preston North End. But I presume this will be the permanent manager. Right, not long to go in the transfer window. Will Fulham push to sign a midfielder? We'll bring you the latest on their pursuit of Scott McTominay next. Welcome back to the final part of Transfer Talk. As usual, just a few bits and bobs to wrap up in these final few minutes. We'll go through a few names that have cropped up. And one that's just popped up, actually, Kevin, is İlkay Gündoğan. There's some stories on social media in The Athletic as well that he's apparently exploring his options in terms of leaving Barcelona. I mean, how voracious do you think these rumours are?
It's a difficult situation because they've signed Dani Olmo, who's a player they really didn't need to sign, but it's a very Barcelona thing to do. Yeah, exactly. But it's a very Barcelona thing to do. He obviously was hot property after the season he had with Spain, the Euros he had with Spain. But also, he is a former La Masia graduate. He was somebody who was with the youth ranks with Barca. He went off to Croatia to play for Dinamo Zagreb, and everybody thought he was crazy, and it worked out brilliantly. But they brought him in. And now there is going to be a logjam in terms of that type of player, because if you look at the way that Hansi Flick wants to play, it'll be 4-2-3-1, you would think. They've got Pedri, they've got Dani Olmo, they've got lots of players who can play in that position. Is İlkay Gündoğan somebody that they could sacrifice to free up a bit of room? Because there are still deals they want to make, there are still books they need to balance. And so we see this a lot. You see campaigns. Frenkie de Jong, a lot of talk in Catalan media. Oh, he's going to go, trying to kind of edge him out. And Gündoğan seems to be the latest name.
OK, that'd be a big deal wherever he goes. How about this potential Lukaku going one way, Osimhen going the other, Napoli and Chelsea? Do you think that will happen?
I think Lukaku will definitely happen because Conte is pushing really, really hard for it. And if you look, Lukaku's best football has often been under Conte. He was brilliant at Inter, alongside Lautaro Martinez. Under Conte, helped them win the Scudetto. So I think he definitely wants to play for Conte. It seems as though maybe it is separate. It's not dependent on what happens with Osimhen. But at the moment, Napoli are a bit stuck because they've set the transfer fee really high. His wages are really high. So they're finding Osimhen really difficult to shift. But I think Lukaku is an absolute priority there to try and beef up that squad and placate Conte, who is not happy already.
Look, if Chelsea could get Osimhen, that would be some statement, wouldn't it? But they might have to offload a few more players to afford him.
It just feels like a difficult one for Chelsea to do within the wage structure. And we spoke to Carve earlier on, and one thing they've worked really hard on doing in the past 2 or 3 years is cleaning up that wage structure, not paying more than £300,000 a week to a player. That's what they've given the likes of Enzo Fernandez and Moises Caicedo these 8-year deals, giving them that long-term security, but on a lower weekly wage. So it does feel difficult for that to happen, but there does really feel like a willingness from all parties for both transactions to take place, which gives you some confidence that, despite this feel like an incredible move to happen, that it could actually materialise. Yeah.
Right, let's talk about a couple of less heralded names involving Brighton. Now, Brian Gruder is going to Brighton for £25 million, a midfielder, and Jorginho Rutter on the verge of joining Brighton as well. I know he's your favourite player, isn't he, Rutter? But you're telling me you love Gruder as well, so which one is it?
Both of them. Get both in there. Look, Rutter we know. I was a little bit late in the sense that I said he was going to do really well when he got to Leeds. Leeds were terrible, as we know, and went down, and he didn't really get a decent run at it. But he dropped into the Championship, played really well, goals, assists, that kind of entertainment that I knew we were going to get from him. His challenge now is to prove that he can do it at a higher level. Brian Gruder has been a name that's been talked about as a rising star in Germany for quite a while. Loves to run at people, a little bit of like a five-a-side dream, that kind of guy, but also can score from range. And when he played against Bayern last season, Thomas Müller was so impressed with him, like put out a message on Instagram about just how impressed he'd been with Gruder. There's real potential there, really exciting player.
OK, I mean, exciting times for Brighton, really. They've started well and they've got two of his favourite players coming to join them as well.
Sign off Thomas Müller as well.
Well, that's it. It's not bad endorsement. And I think Hutzler, really smart guy as well. And it won't just be about attack. It'll be about what they do in defence too.
Kev, always a pleasure. And it feels like an education as well when you're in here. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, Flex. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, James, as well. Thank you guys for watching Transfer Talk as well. We will be back tomorrow at 9 o'clock in the morning. Coming up, the latest on Raheem Sterling's future with Carvey Solokul.